we're going to turn to Norm Hill from Ngāti Whakaia, Ngāti Whawhākia, Ngāti Noho, Ngāti Mahanga, and Norm has the position of being Maangai Māori on the Hamilton City Council with 23 years of environmental management experience at a marae, hapu and iwi level. Nā reira, kei te tuakana, tēnei rā aku mihi ki a koe, kei a koe hoki te wā.
Tēnā tātou, can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
I tēnei wā me tuku mihi ki te rungarawa, kia whakahone tō tātou nei kingi o tira ngā mate huhu o te wā, tātou te hunga ora, tēnei te mihi tēnā koutou katoa. My thinking is all over the place, and I'll do my best to have a really good yarn. And that's going to be my presentation. I wasn't quite sure if I'm going to land on the questions, but we're going to have a good yarn anyway. I did bring my guitar. I was going to try and take 2 minutes to take 2 minutes of my time by singing to give it that cultural flavour, but I won't do that. And I know I had Joe Wrigley in the background to back me up if I did need that anyway. Tēnā tātou katoa. I've come through Waikato-Tainui's the tribal graduate program, managed to get a tohu from university, and I'm now a Maangai in various roles at the Hamilton City Council and others, really in a position to bring unity and collaboration together. Can I firstly, and I'll just watch the time too, because it's 8:52 on my laptop, but I just want to acknowledge Raywin and Karen for mana wahinetanga, and I talk about leadership there, and she gave that presentation just recently, and I just want to acknowledge her because change is occurring here in Waikato. I'm proud to be involved in a movement of change, and the movement of change with regards to the SDGs is something that we as a community inclusive have not done before. Hahowever, Māori ourselves are doing it. If you look at the relevant strategies that iwi Māori have at a hapu marae iwi level, you've got strategy documents galore. If you go into Google and you put cultural strategy, and these marae hapu strategies galore. So we actually have an SDG framework within the cultural context of our people. The key that I see now in regards to this movement of change is how do we connect the dots, and how do we unify and support our principles, our values, our mana motuhaketanga, tino rangatiratanga in achieving key outcomes for our people. And King Tawhio, our first Māori king, Te Whero Tawhio, he spoke about 7 generations. What we do now, we really need to reflect on what is the outcome going to be in 7 generations, and we're actually 7 generations now as a people. And yes, statistically, we know the data in regards to our well-being from a Māori Indigenous perspective. But one of the key opportunities that we have with this movement of inclusive change is the principle of inheritance, in my humble opinion. So from how do we take the principles of rangatahi tanga to rangatiratanga towards mana motuhake, mana whakahaere, tino rangatiratanga me era momo mea. So one of the roles I have, which is a Maangai Māori, a voice for Māori at the Hamilton City Council, has never been done before. And we all know the movement that's happening across Aotearoa Whanui in regards to Māori wards in other ways. And certainly it's not the silver bullet to achieve the overall holistic wellbeing targets that we want as a people. We know the baseline of those targets, and from a Waikato-centric point of view, we always reflect back to the whakatauki and the whakatauaki of yesteryear in terms of our King movement. And the baseline is for us from an environmental holistic point of view is represented in the Waikato River settlement, where King Tawhia se toku awa koi ora me ona pikonga he kuratangi o te mātāmuri, the river of life at each bend more beautiful than the last. So how can we get a river that's full of life more beautiful than the last? It's kind of like an oxymoron, but we actually have a Māori baseline, a target that talks about our state of well-being or nehera. So in regards to that, from a SDG point of view, I'm proud to be a navigator, a manutaki, a supporter of a movement of inclusive change towards our goals that are achievable. And how do we, the key for us from a Waikato point of view and the role I have at the Hamilton City Council is how do we connect to the strategies and the realization of execution of outcomes and impact for our people in regards to taiao, hapori, hauora, whakapapa, Māori, mana, me era momo tangas. So how do we connect with our people with the relevant strategies and execution of those strategies towards outcomes, output, outcome impacts for betterment in regards to the movement of change here in Waikato. So I'm just watching the time, which is near closing for me, I think. In regards to the treaty, yesterday I sat in a meeting here in Kirikiriroa. We have a change happening for the first time in history, a Pou Manawa Ora, it's a wellbeing document, a Māori wellbeing document. And I was really moved by the late lady Te Moxon, where she focused on not the principles of the treaty, but the articles of the treaty, and used the articles as a foundation towards the indicators of well-being, but really pushing hard to ensure that to realize the treaty, it is about partnership, but to realize the treaty, it is about power sharing, is it about decision making, and is about being resourceful to enable and allow and assist and grow and achieve mana motuhake within the context of Aotearoa. So in conclusion, e ki ai te kōrero, ki te kotahi te kākahoka whati, ki te kapuia e kore e whati. When one reed stands alone, you're vulnerable, but when you're all bound tight, you can manage the elements of the wind, the rain, the storms, and unite as one and achieve those key outcomes as you desire. Tēnā tātou.
Tēnā koe, Norm. Just that last whakatauki, very well known one from Waikato-Tainui, and it makes me think of that collective impact that we have when we do work together. And as Sasha mentioned, we saw that with our nationwide Māori response to going into lockdown, and both of our speakers have made me think of back to the earthquakes here in Ōtautahi Christchurch, and in particular how Ngāi Tahu responded to that particular event, distributing resources, being resourceful with this idea that it was going to be for the betterment of everyone, regardless of whether you were Ngāi Tahu or not. Nā reira, tēnei te mihi kia koe, Norm.
And all of the types of things that are embedded in Indigenous worldviews. So I think it's really tempting to do the equivalent of the natives to the rescue. But there's a couple of really important caveats to that. First is we've got to save ourselves before we save the rest of the world. We've got really pressing and complex challenges in our own communities. And we're by nature generous, but there are limits to that generosity. And I'm not sure that we'd want that responsibility. I think that when it comes to change, we do have to acknowledge that the values, the assumptions, the framing of problems and solutions that have got us to this point will not serve us to build solutions, which does mean that we need different values and different people to contribute to decision making. And that's where I think people have to give up something. People who are in comfortable positions of power have to give up some degree of power. People who are doing good work with good intent will still have the same experience of needing to make themselves uncomfortable to contemplate things they haven't contemplated before. And equally, when Māori go into non-Māori environments, we have to experience different forms of being uncomfortable as well. I think we've all got to learn how to be uncomfortable together and not step on each other's toes too much.
Tēnā koe, Sasha. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for any more questions, but I just really wanted to touch on the fact that we had a number of questions kind of framed around how does an individual or how do I as a Pākehā support or work in partnership with Māori communities at a hapu and iwi level. And I think Sasha actually, in a roundabout way, answered that in terms of, we've got to be prepared to give up a bit of power, but also have those uncomfortable and sometimes confrontational conversations and courageous conversations at that too, with the hope that, if we can level the playing field to a certain extent, i.e. be equally uncomfortable in an environment, we've got the possibility to be very creative in terms of how we achieve that change.